Don't forget the red button.
All right. Here, let me just do this. All right. Thanks, everybody, for showing up to Drupal Camp Ottawa. Super excited to be here today. Ottawa is one of my favorite cities, so it's always a treat to come back here and to be able to talk about Drupal at the same time is, even better. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Martin Anderson-Clutz. I work at Acquia. I'm also on a podcast called Talking Drupal on most of the social channels or Drupal Slack, Drupal.org. You can find me as Manclue. And for those hip people who are on Mastodon, you can find me as Manclue at Drupal Community. So, the real reason we're here today is to talk about Drupal, and there's actually some pretty exciting news just today. Time to celebrate because today is the release of Drupal 11. I'm not sure we're going to get the sound through here. I'll try and bump it up. Maybe I'd do this. All right, lots of exciting stuff in there. I'm obviously not going to try and do any kind of exhaustive talk about all of the things that are different in Drupal 11, but I thought it would be worth talking about a few things. Obviously, one of the things in the Drupal community that we've been doing for a few years now is the first release of a new major branch is meant to be, like feature-wise, basically the same as the last release. So there's not a lot different between 11.0 and 10.3 by design. That's meant to make it easier to sort of migrate between those versions. There are some things, especially about the recipe system, that we'll talk about a little bit later that are different. But in terms of understanding what are the new features, it's really better to compare what's in Drupal 11 to what was in Drupal 10.0. So lots of these were actually featured on within the video, but some of the ones I'm really excited about, workspaces, that idea of being able to have kind of a virtual environment where you can work on lots of content and then publish it all at once, I think is, for a lot of different organizations that use a lot of Drupal, going to be super helpful for myself as somebody who maintains a bunch of modules. There's a new deprecation helper that I found super useful and I think is going to allow for module maintainers to adopt emerging best practices sooner while maintaining backwards compatibility. So I think in terms of that idea of it being easier and easier to move between major versions of Drupal, I think it's a small thing, but I think it's going to have a big impact. CK Editor auto format is a similar thing. One of the bigger changes going from Drupal 9 to 10 was moving to CK Editor 5, and auto format is something that was added later on as sort of a way for content editors to use kind of like markdown style syntax to be able to add headings in different kinds of formats. So again, I can't go into all of this, but lots of features that are really going to make, I think, Drupal 11 quite a leap forward for everyone. And as I mentioned, there is this new thing in Drupal 11. There was some of it in 10.3, but even moving to 11, it's even, I think, significantly better. So we'll talk a little bit more about recipes further on in our talk. Of course, Drupal core itself is not the only consideration when you're thinking about moving your site to Drupal 11. So need to pay attention to, what does the contrib space look like in terms of Drupal 11 support. And this was, I think, almost a week ago, so I'm sure it's, improved significantly even since then. But you can see already, if you're looking at, let's say, the top 200 modules, based on popularity on Drupal.org, about 2/3 of them are already ready for Drupal 11. And then if you add in the modules that either only need sort of an info.yaml update or maybe some fixes applied that are sort of automatically generated that will bring them to sort of full Drupal 11 compatibility, that takes us over 80%. So in terms of the ability to really start or even start building Drupal 11 sites today that are going to be really robust and full featured, the good news is really even on launch day we're in a really solid shape. And just to sort of quickly show, look at the sort of pace of adoption in terms of modules being switched over. So you can see if we can kind of maintain that pace, we're going to be in a really good spot very quickly. Now, one of the other things that was changed over the course of Drupal 10 was PHP 8.3 compatibility. And the Kinsta group did some comparisons in terms of different CMS solutions and the kinds of differences that it made to their sort of performance or ability to serve up kind of like requests per second. And you can see for Drupal 7, there's a little bit of benefit, but it's pretty incremental. Whereas if you look at Drupal 10, 8.1 to 8.2, very marginal improvement, but 8.2 to 8.3, huge improvement. And I think that's a real testament to the work that the community has done to adopt a lot of best practices around, like PHP fibers and lots of things that are sort of at the heart of the deeper level of improvements that the PHP community is putting into the new releases. Here's a comparison of Drupal to some of the other technologies. So even something that is, I would say, probably a much simpler kind of framework like CodeIgniter is actually only a little better than Drupal 10 when you look at the performance on PHP 8.3. And really, of all of the different technologies they compared, Drupal 10 had sort of the most benefit by moving to PHP 8.3. So I'm really excited to see, with Drupal 11 as, PHP 8.3 as the baseline, I think we're going to see Drupal websites that are going to be much faster by moving to this new version. Now, the other sort of technical view I like to look at when comparing sort of Drupal to other CMS technologies is to use Google's data, because I would say that in the world there's probably nobody who invests more resources, more time and energy and basically spending money on analyzing websites than Google does. And if you look at their core Web Vitals rankings, you can see that they give Drupal a pretty sizable head start in terms of the kinds of user experiences that they sort of estimate that you're going to get out of the box by using Drupal. So you can see you get a pretty significant head start, and because this is a ranking metric, that also means from a search engine optimization standpoint, again, you get a pretty solid head start by starting your site with Drupal. Now that being said, the data that they collect is probably not all rosy. If you look at the number of installs, Drupal certainly has a pretty sizable lead on what we would call kind of our enterprise CMS competitors. But when you look at how we compare to something like WordPress, it's a bit of a different story. And when I was thinking about these numbers, it sort of got me thinking about, what was it that originally brought me to Drupal? So I know for a lot of us that have been in the community for over a decade, a lot of times we got started working on really simple sites. So the first Drupal website I ever built was a pro bono site for a local nonprofit, and then sort of, found that it was easy to use, started building more and more sites with it, finding that it had both the, relative ease of getting it stood up, but then also, you could adapt it to lots of different kinds of use cases. And at the time we had the saying, come for the code and stay for the community. Now the thing is that since then a couple of different things have happened. So number one, when we made the change from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, we adopted some really excellent tools, but the onus that they put on the site builder to really be able to embrace more technical tools was definitely palpable, and there was a reaction from the community. I mean, that's the reason why we have Backdrop CMS today. And then meanwhile, something else was happening, which is more and more of the people looking to build websites actually didn't want to touch code at all. So a saying like this to people who don't want to use code to build websites isn't as enticing as it was, back when this was one of the popular mottos in the Drupal space. What we see is that today, a lot of the people who want to build a website, they want something that they can, click a button to start trying out and using. They don't want to have to, set up a local development environment or have a hosting environment available. They want features that are robust out of the box. They don't want to have to browse through a library of 10,000 different modules to be able to start to solve some of the common use cases that they know they need to have in their web presence. And they want something that's going to be easy to maintain over time. And so to try and address all of these and more, the Drupal community has come up with a Starshot initiative as a way to really try and make it easy for people who are thinking about using Drupal to have that experience where they can get something stood up quickly, have a good experience, a robust experience out of the box, and something that's going to be easy to maintain over time. So the community has been working at making Drupal easier to use, but there's definitely still ground to cover there. So this was something that Dries had shared about 5 years ago. They had done some studies, basically collecting some data around opinions of developers who use a variety of different CMS technologies. And what they found was that the more that people use Drupal, the more that they liked using it, whereas with other systems they might have a more favorable initial impression, but the deeper they got with it, sort of the lower their overall sentiment tended to be. So, as they started to try and do more complex integrations or have more complex content architectures, they started to hit the limits of what some of these other technologies could support. So in terms of closing that gap for Drupal, trying to flatten that curve basically so people can have a much better initial impression, and then from there hopefully continue to have a good experience, what are some of the things that are holding us back? Well, certainly it's probably not a surprise to anyone in here that Drupal core itself sometimes can be slow to change. I think we've done some good work at sort of turning that around to some degree. If you look at the pace of innovation, particularly in the recent sort of 6-month feature releases, we have been able to see more things happening, but it certainly doesn't compare to kind of the pace of innovation that we have among contrib modules. Also, Drupal core, the way we provide it is really targeted at developers. So you need that sort of hosting environment for it. So whether that's something that you stand up in your local using like DDEV or Doxel or something like that, or having to have a web environment if you want to collaborate with other people there, it's something that's not necessarily easy, particularly for less technical users, to get started with. Now the other thing is, again, core is only part of a typical solution, because most sites are going to have dozens, maybe over 100 different modules that they're going to use to provide the kinds of experiences that they know their users need. And then that means you need sort of a team of experienced Drupalists who can sort of navigate that sea of different contrib modules to know which are the right ones to use. And then sometimes there are different ones that are similar, but when you want to use one can be very nuanced. And so having the expertise to navigate that is not always easy. So when you think about those two extremes of having sort of Drupal core only that's very secure and stable, and then your live Drupal site that is very full-featured but maybe expensive to develop, what if we could have something that was in the middle? And that's exactly what Starshot is meant to be. So the idea of having something that can be something ambitious site builders can get started using very quickly, have a robust set of features out of the box, and then also make it super easy to add additional features as they continue to use it. So the vision for Starshot is to allow site builders without Drupal experience to easily build and launch open source Drupal sites. And to that end, there's this vision that was presented early on of having, this could be something that could be on the homepage of Drupal.org to allow people basically self-select. So are you a developer who wants to sort of get your hands right into the code and start poking around in the framework? Are you somebody who just wants to build a website, and now let's give you a single button you can click to launch an experience where you can start to understand what's the power of Drupal, and again, going beyond just core. So the focus areas then for Starshot are going to be around installation. So again, making that as easy as one button to click to be able to start using Drupal. Having a set of robust configuration out of the box, but then making that easy to extend. and then making that something that they can launch and basically share on the web very easily. So this was announced with probably the most ambitious part of Starshot being the time frame. So we're looking to do this by the end of 2024. So, you know, when you think back at some of the initiatives in the Drupal space, like Workspaces is a great example, got into core as an experimental module, but it's literally taken several years for that to now be stable. With Starshot, the goal is to have it done by the end of 2024, and when you look at that having been announced on May 6th, and now, you know, the intended delivery is for December 31st, that's 239 days. So as we sit here today, we're a little over a third of the way through. So here's the Starshot mission. I'm going to read it really quick just so we have sort of a baseline understanding of what people are sort of seeing as their North Star with Starshot. So Drupal Starshot is a fast-moving open source product that enables site builders without Drupal experience to easily build and launch a new Drupal site and extend it with prepackaged recipes, all using only their browser. Unlike Drupal core, it will guide site builders to install recipes for common best practices and state-of-the-art innovations that are fast and easy to set up, thanks to smart defaults and minimal steps. Drupal CMS will focus on getting people to install, or from install to launch really fast, and bringing new people and contributors into Drupal and the open web. So that's a high-level understanding of sort of, you know, the overall goals of Starshot and the approach that we're going to take, but what's in Starshot itself. So certainly Drupal core is going to continue to be at the heart of Starshot, but onto that we're going to add automatic updates as a way for site owners to, you know, easily and less expensively keep their websites up to date. A project browser as sort of a very visual way to add new capabilities as they need them. Recipes as a way to sort of bundle together sets of configurations so that, unlike sort of step-by-step site building that a lot of us are used to, they become sort of more drop-in sets of configuration to achieve common use cases. And then Experience Builder as sort of a next-generation page creation experience to make it very, very easy and intuitive to create those one-off experiences. So starting with automatic updates, some people would say you could almost think of it better named as Package Manager, because there's sort of a piece at the core of it that's sort of a composer integration that allows your website, without requiring a developer who can sort of go in on the command line, to perform a variety of updates to the actual code base. Essentially what it'll do is create a clone of your code base, do things like, you know, update it to a new, let's say, security release. As long as the site runs well on that updated code base, then it'll switch it over and sort of get rid of the old version. So doing a lot of sophisticated work in the background, but making that very easy for a less technical user to keep their website up to date. In terms of progress, there's already a stable contrib module, and the process is underway of getting this moved into core. So already there's a security advisory display, so sort of integration with some of the tooling that the security team uses to make sure that site owners know when there's a security update they need to apply. But now the next piece is around getting that package manager into core, and then finally the actual sort of automatic updates UI. So the next piece we're going to talk about is a project browser. I like to think of this as almost like that App Store experience. So instead of having to go into Drupal.org as a separate website and then search and then sort of try and compare different modules, the idea is that Project Browser will help to guide site owners towards the, you know, the modules and recipes that are going to be the best fit for, you know, common use cases, common challenges that they might be likely to have. So in terms of progress, there was a lot of work done on revamping the project categories, making sure that there was good metadata, and the most popular modules have logos. So again, trying to make it a very visual and intuitive experience. There was also a ton of work that went into creating an endpoint for the project browser to ingest, you know, sort of real-time data from Drupal.org. There is now a functional contrib module. It's kind of in an alpha state. It does work with recipes, and so there's work underway around having kind of more of a project detail view. So the idea, like, there's been a lot of work around sort of being able to browse, but also to be able to dig into a particular like project or recipe. Obviously, we need to get that stable and into core before we can sort of consider that part of Starshot complete. Now recipes, again, are this idea of really having sort of, instead of like distributions, which tended to be kind of painful from a distribution maintainer standpoint, but then also if you had a site that was built under distribution, there could be challenges around sort of being able to update your site right away. Sometimes they were maybe too opinionated because you sort of like as an example, I once built a site on the Thunder distribution. I didn't need all of the parts of it, but then when I went to do like a major upgrade, it sort of expected pieces to be there that I had to then re-enable so that I could update and then disable them again. So the idea of recipes is that it's a much more composable way to have out-of-the-box functionality. So here's an idea of what it could look like as someone who wants to create a new Drupal site. Basically, I get prompted in terms of what kind of site I want to build, and then I can choose sort of specific capabilities that I want within that. So all of this being provided by recipes. And then now there's also this idea that after the site has been built, we'll have some kind of a dashboard where the site owner can go in and sort of understand what are the next things that I should do to sort of really finish the overall setup of my site, as opposed to just sort of like being taken to the home page and being like, here's the keys to the helicopter, have fun, right? So providing a bit more guidance and structure in terms of like what are the next things to do after the site is installed. And then obviously you can continue to use things like the project browser to add additional capabilities to your site even after launch. In terms of what goes into a recipe, probably the most significant piece is going to be this recipe.yaml file, where you can tell it other recipes that it should install first. Are there other sort of modules or themes that it should install? What configuration it should import from those, and then also you can use configuration or config actions as a way to sort of provide flexibility in terms of how the recipe gets applied. So some people refer to recipes as kind of like the meat of Starshot, and I would say config actions are like the secret sauce. I'm going to be giving a whole talk about recipes in a couple weeks at DrupalCon, so if that's something you want to know more about, then watch for the recording when that's available. In addition to that, you're likely going to need a composer.json file to sort of bring in those dependencies automatically so that they can be applied. You can also pull in sort of static config files, the kind you would export with like drush.cx, that kind of a thing. And then also it has support now in core for like default content. So you can actually create, let's say, categories out of the box for something, or even if you want to have like demo content that your recipe can create. Those are the kinds of things now you don't have to have any extra modules to be able to do, thanks to the overall recipe system. So we now have recipe support in core. There was some initially as of 10.3, but it's, as I say, been improved in 11.0. We have a number of the installed profiles in core are actually now converted into recipes. So if you install standard now, it's actually using a recipe as opposed to the older profile that were sort of, again, could be opinionated around which things you could and couldn't remove. There's actually in the new version of Drush support for recipes, and there's been quite a bit of work in terms of making sure that there's good documentation for recipes. So if this is something you really want to sort of like geek out and go down the rabbit hole, there's good documentation. There's also a good Slack channel there. So in terms of what needs to be done, sort of stabilize that API, and then there's a bunch of different recipes that are intended to be created as part of the Starshot project. And then the last sort of major element is Experience Builder. So the idea here is, again, to create a very modern page building experience, trying to be sort of much simplified when you compared to things like Layout Builder, which out of the box can be a bit overwhelming to some people when they're creating different kinds of content experiences. So the overall idea is to try and have Experience Builder be the best of Layout Builder and the best of paragraphs, also to provide in-browser theming. So again, the idea of a site owner to be able to create and fully customize the site, even in terms of the overall presentation layer without having to write any code. And then also having support for things like single directory components. So definitely some lofty goals, but there has been quite a bit of progress already. So they've defined kind of a new component entity. So a lot of the existing sort of layout systems that you have for Drupal use either paragraphs or blocks, neither of which were really intended for that like page building experience. So using an entity that was really built with that purpose in mind, I think right away is an improvement. There is already the integration with single directory components, and they do have some sort of working proofs of concept in terms of some of these different sort of front-end and back-end elements working together. One other thing that I think is super cool is they already have working codes so that you can use a mixture of like Twig syntax as well as more like JSX style templating, so that front ends who maybe aren't from the Drupal world or even the PHP world and don't understand Twig and don't want to, don't have to. So lots of flexibility, and definitely should be more welcoming to lots of different kinds of front end developers. So we did talk about this idea of being able to launch Drupal with a single click. And Matt Glaman, who a longtime Drupalist, hopefully some people in the audience know who he is, posted this blog post about a month ago talking about the work that he had done in the past week. He also posted an update, and so now you can go on his website, and with that single click, you can launch a prototype version of Starshot and start poking around with it. So there's still a few things that need to be addressed, but to see this as far along as it is, I think is also pretty exciting. So let's talk a little bit around the team and the approach they're going to be used to make all of this happen. So the guiding principles for Starshot: try and make fast and efficient decisions, and then make sure that those are openly communicated and published, and really try and overall prioritize the goals and the target persona when making those decisions. So really make it about that end user, the less technical user trying to build out their Drupal website. So lots of familiar faces in terms of who's leading it overall. But there is also now a Starshot Council that is going to provide a lot of guidance and input to the overall effort. So bringing in sort of, again, not just sort of programmers and developers and longtime Drupalists, but also trying to bring in site builders and some other people to sort of provide a broad perspective, make sure that the decisions that are being made are, again, with that end user in mind, as well as sort of technically feasible. So lots of different reasons why people are excited about Starshot. Gabor, I think just after DrupalCon Portland, posted a good blog article sort of summarizing some of the different opinions that he had gotten. I think for me, I love the idea that as a community, we can be a bit more focused in saying, we're going to focus on a smaller number of different solutions and then make those really awesome, as opposed to sort of like everybody going off in lots of different directions and not making as much progress on any of them. So in his announcement, Drupal talked about how realizing the vision for Starshot will require the best of each of us. So sort of paraphrasing JFK's moonshot speech, we're really talking about how if we're going to accomplish this goal of achieving so much in 8 months, we really need to sort of all pull together, really understand that while sometimes decisions might be made that we necessarily don't agree with, understanding that because they're being made with the end user in mind, we need to sort of fall in and sort of pull in the same direction. So if you want to get involved, there is this drupal.org/Starshot page that has links to some of the sessions and webinars that have already been done, as well as some of the issues you can work on and the Slack channels to go into. I'm not going to go too much into these. These are the different work tracks that they've defined for Starshot. So really trying to say these are the different things that the community can start working on in parallel. So you can see there's a number of them that are really focused around creating the recipes that are going to provide that Starshot experience. But there's also a variety of sort of non-technical things. So just making sure that the content on Drupal.org is always up to date so that the community is aware. Making sure that we have sort of the right marketing materials so that these messages can get to those end users who might be thinking about creating a Drupal or a Starshot website. And then there's even a variety of issues about helping to define what are the different ways that Starshot should approach things like SEO or advanced search and so on. So regardless of where your comfort level is in the community, so if you're keen to go ahead and start developing solutions, there are tracks that are sort of well-defined enough that you can go in today and start contributing with code. But if you're more of a strategist and you want to go in and provide some guidance, like maybe I built a bunch of websites in WordPress and here's how it handled SEO, or some of those kinds of things. There's lots of different ways to sort of get involved and contribute. So, here we go. So how can you help? Yeah, definitely code, but then also even providing feedback on existing patches that have been posted, updating an issue summary if it's an issue that's got like dozens or in some cases hundreds of comments on there, hoping to make sure that there's a clear and concise issue summary that really reflects the latest spot in the discussion is always super helpful. Providing UX feedback, so maybe you're more of a designer, so to be able to say we can provide UX feedback, or maybe we can even test some of the things that are being proposed and give you the feedback that we get from real users. Those are all going to be incredibly helpful. If you're somebody who's just coming to Drupal and you have some understanding of how some of these things are being solved in other systems, then that would be amazing to share. Helping to write documentation, having module logos or even recipe logos as those are being developed. And then even just helping to make sure that the community is focused on the right tasks and the right order and some of those kinds of things. So, doing a quick check on time, I thought it would be fun to just talk about my own Drupal journey and maybe we can sort of draw some parallels there to how you can get involved. So for myself, when I started using Drupal over 18 years ago, as I say, it was a very different beast back then. But I would say that my path in Drupal is a lot like one of these old cartoons where there's really no straight lines from A to B, just a lot of sort of wandering around based on what attracted my attention at the time. So, definitely started off as a newbie, then sort of having discussions with people in the forums about how to achieve certain things, eventually figuring out my own solutions to things and getting those posted, eventually figured out how to write patches for those. That eventually led to actually maintaining my own modules and creating modules. Started to do some core contribution, and then most recently have actually been named a Starshot track lead for the events recipe. The very first site that I built for Drupal was not only pro bono, but I also did hack core. So, sorry kitten. Long time saying in the Drupal community, every time you hack core, God kills a kitten, so please don't hack core. But anyway, I just thought that would be fun to share. So also in terms of my, the ways that I've been involved in Drupal have also changed in terms of, again, not only being somebody who was sort of a site builder starting out, but eventually starting to advocate, literally sell Drupal to people looking to build websites. Also becoming a mentor, so helping other people who are new to Drupal. Eventually speaking at events like this one, helping to organize some events, and then all the way through kind of blogging and more recently podcasting to sort of share some of that knowledge that I had accumulated. And also the topics that I've been involved with or passionate about have changed over the time. So all along I've been really passionate about how can we make the experience for content creators and editors as simple as possible. Also done some deep dives around SEO and particularly performance. So how can we make Drupal sites render as quickly as possible? Location mapping, search, especially with Solar, managing events and dates and times. Some of you will be familiar with Smart Date, which is a module that I've been involved with. I have stickers, by the way. And accelerated site building, which has some pretty significant overlap with recipes. So when I heard that as an initiative, I got pretty excited about that. And then, of course, more recently, like a lot of people, artificial intelligence, although for myself it's more about like how can we use these tools in a way that dovetails nicely with the overall sort of Drupal experience and makes it even easier for content editors and so on. But really the most important takeaway here is that Starshot needs you. So what are maybe some practical tips in terms of how you might get involved? So overall I would say, follow the things that strike you as interesting. And it can be okay to change course. Maybe you want to spend a month or two working on one particular track, and then it feels like it's getting to a place where it's sort of like very in the weeds, like very small, minute code changes, and you're not feeling like it has the same excitement of working on that. It's just perfectly fine to go work on something else. You may also try different ways of contributing. So maybe you start by going in and trying to clean up some of those issue summaries or providing input on things that are still being defined, but then later on you decide you want to start trying to test out and give feedback on patches that other people are posting, and that might lead you to starting to update some of those patches yourself, and then eventually writing some of those. So that'll probably change over time. You can also think about, do you want to focus more on core, where the contributions that you do are going to have a wider impact, or contrib modules where things can happen more quickly, but they're probably going to have less of an impact in terms of the number of sites that your work is going to benefit. Overall, I would say, be respectful. We do have sort of guides of conduct, but just in general, understand that people are generally there because they want to help out. So there may be people that English isn't their first language, so they may be responding in a way that there's no ill intent. It's just they may not have gotten some of the nuances of what you're trying to get across. So understand that there are lots of different ways to get help. So certainly Drupal Slack is an amazing resource. Contribute and maintainers, depending on whether you're more focused on Drupal core or contrib projects are a couple of good ones. If you want to try and find contribution events, that can be a really excellent way to sort of literally sit next to somebody and sort of peer code and some of those kinds of things. And then also there's Starshot, and then specific channels for recipes and experience builder and all of those kinds of things. Obviously the issue queues are a good way to understand what are some of the things that people are working on and sort of understand where you can help there. But then there are also resources like podcasts, newsletters, video training sites, and sort of your Stack Exchange style sites where you can also get things answered. And then the last suggestion is, don't forget to look after yourself. So your contribution is not more important than your well-being. So take breaks when you need them. Make sure you get good sleep. If you feel like you're overdoing it, maybe try time boxing your contribution. But yeah, don't bring yourself out. Drupal is better off with your long-term health being looked after. So again, when we think about that sort of balance between core only, that's low risk, high quality, and your contribution can have sort of a broad impact, but maybe won't get implemented very quickly, versus traditionally the other end of the spectrum is core and all of the different modules. Starshot provides this really beautiful middle ground, and to me, from a contribution perspective, I think this is really an amazing time in sort of the history of Drupal in terms of being able to work on things that are going to get adopted quickly, but also make a huge difference. And so, to me, this is a great time to sort of, if you're not already involved in Drupal and helping out in the community, this is an amazing time to jump in. So that's my talk for today, and happy to answer any questions. Also, there's a QR code for the slides there if anybody wants to access those. So that's it. I think we're... I see a question over here. So the question was, with the 2024 timeline for Drupal Starshot, are we expecting a similar timeline for managed hosting? So I would say the simple answer is that at least the initial approach to that idea of being able to sort of click and launch your Drupal site, it's going to be in browser, and that's the one that we showed. In terms of how somebody would sort of download that and then turn that into an externally faced website, I'm not sure that we necessarily have a clear idea on that. So that may not happen before the end of 2024, but if you have some ideas, we would love to hear from you. So. At this point, I'm not sure what differences, at least the major hosting companies, are planning. I do feel like things like automatic updates probably will require some changes, either to the way that that those projects interact with things like a Git repository, or there may need to be some changes at sort of that infrastructure level. And I'm not sure that all of that has been figured out yet. So. Hopefully by the end of 2024, but I'm not sure. I mean, there may be some pieces so as an example, the experience builder, the work to date has really been more on the page layout side of things, whereas things like the in-browser theming may not happen before the end of 2024. So there are certain things that are going to be sort of MVP, and yes, there will be things that probably will be continuing to work on into 2025. Yeah.
Thanks for the great talk, Mark. your slide about what's in it for me, I think it's great to dive into that, but I disagree with your list. I think your list was more like what's in it for the organization that I work with. But I think there is a lot here that can benefit us as individuals. Like over the last year or two, like we've seen this slow burn of layoffs in the tech industry. And so it's really kind of like not optional to be doing professional development. Like we all need to be doing, whether we're in product or an engineer or a content person, we all need to be doing professional development. Can you talk a little bit about how contributing to this can bring benefits to us?
So I'm going to summarize that by saying the question was, how can contributing to Starshot help an individual more from a professional development standpoint, as opposed to like how their organization wants to build websites or some of those kinds of things. I mean, I definitely feel like there's such a need right now for people to get involved that from a visibility standpoint, it's an amazing opportunity to sort of get noticed by senior people within the Drupal community in ways that probably would have taken a lot more time, sort of like making small contributions to issues that take years. So I feel like again, sort of the speed at which Starshot is meant to work can act as a bit of an accelerator in terms of sort of getting visibility within the community. But I also think there's just like so much that needs to be done that if you have the ability to go in, it gives you a chance to sort of try out lots of different things that maybe just doing project work for customers wouldn't necessarily get to get your hands dirty with some of those things as easily. So.
I think, well, thanks, by the way, that was a great presentation.
Thanks.
My perspective is that Experience Builder is easily the most important thing here. And that for those people that control budgets, marketing people, people who control the content on the site, page, layout builder, and paragraphs, both are, especially layout builders, so idiosyncratic that it's a huge obstacle to people wanting to keep current sites. So my question is, in your insight, is Experience Builder, which at one point I think was projected to maybe follow at the very end, is it going to be plug and play so that we can introduce it to existing sites? Or is the concept that it'll work with Starshot for those of us with existing large sites? We're in a tear down and rebuild.
So the question is, with Experience Builder, is it intended to be able to work with existing sites that might be using things like Layout Builder or Paragraphs, or are sites that require that kind of sophisticated site building, should they expect sort of a rebuild, particularly for those kinds of custom pages? So certainly what I've heard is that the intent is for it to work with Layout Builder and Paragraphs on existing sites. So it should be something that you can sort of layer on top of existing layouts that you have. How much of that is going to work by the end of 2024, I don't know. I think probably the MVP is going to be to say, for new sites, to make that as seamless an experience as possible, and then probably start to add some of that backwards compatibility is my understanding. Yep.
Yes, I can see as a new starter that the leverage is all about learning curve. That's encouraging.
Right. Sorry, was there a question?
No,
Okay.
I'm just saying it's, I guess that's what you need is for the leverage.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Especially if you want to go up against WordPress.
Yep. Yep. The comment was that it's looks like it's going to be impressive on creating that beneficial or improved initial experience. Definitely agree. Last one.
So to follow up on that question, and also to come back to your chart, where people Drupal experience just gets better and better as people use it, and it feels like the project here is trying to sort of emulate more WordPress ease of use. But what is the loss of that?
So the question was, with some of the things that are being proposed in Starshot, what's the potential downside? I think So particularly when you think about things like I was saying, you know, the idea of getting the community more focused on fewer projects, you know, there is sometimes a natural sort of like, you know, it's a bit of like Drupal code Darwinism of like, you know, the modules that stop being well maintained give an opportunity for people who want to solve that same problem in a different way, a chance to sort of like come up with a different approach, and then, you know, people can get excited about that, and then that becomes the new thing. And so there can be a bit of a sort of like natural like dying off of old ways and spontaneous creation of new things, and it may be that will be to some degree impeded if Starshot sort of like keeps us locked into certain ways of doing things, but hopefully there will be that sense of, you know, Starshot itself can switch tracks periodically. But
And have that flexibility, because I think the majority of people that stay with Drupal and love Drupal is because it is so intense and flexible. And so it's about kind of building on it.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that was
yeah, absolutely, totally great. So thank you for that. All right, I think we're past time here, so probably wrap it up. Thanks all.